long time. Hope I can make it through it. It's not my normal key, I don't think. But we've never had a video on this song, and it's never been out there except for on the album called Shine the Light. It's a song called Chance to Choose, and that's what everybody is born equally with. Nobody's born equally, and nobody's created equally. But everybody that is born that has a decent brain has a chance to choose. So the decision is yours. So many chances all your life, in between the altar and the pew, resisting God's Spirit all the while, denying God's scriptures were true. You say you did not want to be embarrassed. Was that your excuse for the day? Oh, when you stand before God's white throne, let's hear what you got to say. With a lake of fire below you, God about to speak the word. Can't say nobody warned you. Oh no, you can't say nobody heard. Let's hear you tell them you had no chance. Tell them you were born to lose. You know you made the wrong decision. Your free will chance to choose. You should have followed the Romans road. You should have believed John 3:16. You say the cross is not your load. Made your bed in the in-between. You say heaven doesn't want you. You brag that you'd take over hell. That fountain freely given, but to you a wishing well. With a lake of fire below you, God about to speak the word. You can't say nobody warned you. Oh no, you can't say you never heard. Let's hear you tell them you had no chance. Tell him you were born to lose. You know you made the wrong decision. With your free will chance to choose. You know you made the wrong decision. With your free will chance. That's one powerful song, folks. And everybody has a chance to choose. I hope you make the right decision when it comes your chance to choose between the devil and the Lord. Today's lesson is on America and America to remember. I remember I was great in history. I was great in math. And I hear Zed is pretty good in math himself. Heard he won a reward in math. Good, Zed. Listen, learn history, but learn the true history. King James Bible is the greatest history book that ever lived. It's ever written. It is a history of God's dealing with man and man's dealing with man and the way man acts toward God and the way God acts toward man. It's true. It's the greatest history book on the face of the earth, and I learned it. I also learned history when I was in school growing up, and I remembered it. And let me tell you something. In 60 years, they have revised the history book so terribly it's not even funny. I saw one on YouTube where they're saying black people built Stonehenge and that Emperor Nero's wife was a transgender. I mean, these fools, with the influence of the devil and with the devil's pen, are rewriting history and have been for years now. But I remember history, see? And I'm going to tell you about a little bit of the history of America. And I want you children to listen, because you're going to get true history. So when they teach you in history books anything besides what this King James Bible says and what I told you here, they're liars and they're revisionists. They live on revisionism street and they're all liars. Okay, America was first, had what they call the Native Americans, what we call Indians. Okay, they weren't created here and they weren't born here. When they first came here, they came here across the Bering Straits, down through Canada, and down through America. And they settled it. And people said, oh, the poor indigenous people, they were so peaceful. No, they weren't. They were heathen, okay? I don't mean to talk bad about them, but the truth's the truth. You go back enough a few hundred years, and all my ancestors were heathen too. The ones that didn't know God. The ones that don't know God or reject God turn out to be heathen. That's what the book says. Well, America was settled mainly by Europeans. Europeans from Ireland, from Scotland, that were escaping England. England persecuted Scotland. They persecuted Ireland. They actually took some of the white women from the Scottish and from the Irish, sold them into slavery to the Moroccans, to black people. Well, that's where the word Mandingo comes from. Yeah, that's what they did. They sold our ancestors into slavery, England did. So we tried to escape England. Ireland, Scotland, a lot of Europeans came straight over here to America, and they risked coming over here in the ships that they had. Now, it was predicted in the Bible. It was written in the Bible. I used to read in the Bible when I was over in Genesis about Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the three main races which came from Noah. And it said of Shem, it said, Japheth shall dwell in the tents of Shem. And I thought, what does that mean? Well, later on when I got to realizing that the American Indian is a Shemite, just like the Japanese, the Chinese, the Jews, they're Shemites. Japheth, that's what they call the white man. Well, Japheth came over here to America and dwelt in the tents of Shem. You can't beat that Bible with a stick. It was predicted. It said it was going to happen. Now, they were heathen. They fought amongst themselves pretty bad. Well, we escaped England. We fought the Indians. We made our way here in America and started worshiping God without the influence of the Church of England or the Catholic Church that was persecuting us for our believing in Jesus Christ. Well, England at one time was called the British Empire, and they said the sun never set on the British Empire. And it didn't. They had places all over the world. They had conquered places. But then they made a grievous mistake. They didn't like the King James Bible, so they threw it out. They said, we don't like it. We want rid of it. Well, guess what? The settlers brought with them King James Bible and a Wycliffe Bible. Well, once England kicked out the KJV, guess what happened? They started losing territory all over the world. Here comes the Revolutionary War. Our first American soldiers, they were led by George Washington, and George Washington actually slept with the soldiers on the ground in the snow. He was crossing the Potomac River with it icy. He was with them. He was a commander-in-chief that served with his soldiers. He was a great man. And those people, listen, they didn't have all the medicines they do now. They didn't have the doctors they do now. If you got your arm shot off with a cannonball, they took a hot searing iron and seared it and tried to stop the blood and hoped you wouldn't get gangrene. But they didn't have penicillin, they didn't have shot, they didn't have all that stuff. So those soldiers had it rough. Well, we whipped those redcoats. Yeah, we whipped them. We gained our independence and we started America. 13 colonies. 13 is the number of rebellion, and we rebelled against England and we won. Well, not long after that, here comes the War of 1812. England thinks they're going to come back and they're going to conquer us. Well, we whipped those redcoats again. Whipped them and sent them back across the big pond. Then the next war was the Civil War. That has had history rewritten on it so much it ain't even funny. I remember the history. Right now they say the Civil War was fought over slavery. No, it was not fought over slavery. That was the issue they said and they used to try to make the South look terrible. But let me tell you something. The South had some good people in it. The South did have a lot of people that owned slaves, but they wasn't poor old hicks like us. They were the rich people that owned slaves. And let me tell you something, there were some black rich folks that owned slaves too, and there's a lot in the North owned slaves. The reason for the fight was this. The South was an agricultural country. The North was an industrial country. The North kept bringing in immigrants till they couldn't feed them no more. They were in debt terribly, and they were borrowing money from the South, right and left. Borrowing money. Well, the South was making money. They were agriculture and they were selling. But at the time of the Civil War broke out, the North had 90-something% of the railroads, 100% of the ships. They had no navy. The South had no navy. They had all of the munitions and the arms making places. They had it all going for them. We had agriculture. Well, to try to get some of that money back that the North owed the South, they said, hey, move the capital from Philadelphia to where it is now. We'll give part of Virginia and you give part of, I guess it would be Pennsylvania, whatever's north, I think, north of that, and we will form the District of Columbia. That way it ain't as far for us Southerners to go to the capital. So, in exchange for a bunch of the money that was owed, they moved the capital to where it is today. But still, the North owed the South. So the North said, hey, the reason y'all make all the money, you got slave labor. And it rocked on until there was a war. I call it the War of Northern Aggression. That we didn't attack them first, except try to get them out of Fort Sumter. Well, I love the South. I love some of my ancestors were from the South. If the South would have won, it'd probably be a whole lot different. Now, look at the politicians they got up north. Just look at them. Wow. We got some pretty rough ones in the South, too. But there's a lot of lies told about it, try to make me look at my ancestors from the South as dogs. I still got a Confederate flag. Oh, yeah, and I'm proud of it. Because my folks never wanted slaves. They never wanted any. They didn't want anybody, and they didn't believe in race mixing, and they didn't believe in multiculturalism. Okay, after that came the Spanish-American War. It's around the end of the 1800s with Teddy Roosevelt, Rough Riders, and we fought the Spanish, we fought Mexicans. That's the last time we ever kept any land. Anytime we had a war, we kept the land we took. Every war. Until World War I. World War I breaks out. They had the Allies, and they had America got in to save Europe. America got in and saved England. They were fixing to go down. France had already gone down. They had been conquered. So here comes the American boys, some of the greatest fighters on the face of the earth at that time. World War I. They went in there and they whipped Kaiser. Kaiser was the leader of Germany. Well, instead of keeping Germany and making them pay their way out for being conquered and pay for their freedom again, we just give it back to them. Guess what? It wasn't 20 years later until they were nearly able to conquer the world again under Hitler. Hitler he conquered Europe again. Guess what? World War II. Those were some serious, serious people. Those men, listen, I heard the stories on World War II personally. I heard it from Uncle Paul, who served in New Guinea and the Philippines. I heard them from Doyle Fortenberry, who served in France. Now, them boys in World War II, they had to go in there and they would move forward, and they had to dig them a foxhole, a hole in the ground in the frozen dirt with their shovels to get down where the bullets coming across them at night, where they're trying to sleep or rest, wouldn't take them out. Well, World War II was tough. It was rough. Uncle Paul talked to me about sleeping over in the swamps and in the Philippines over there. He said they had to sleep, tie their hammocks to the trees, keep the snakes off of them and keep them from, sleeping in wet ground. Well, we had Uncle Paul served in World War II. We had my Uncle Robert Summerhour. He was lost a kamikaze pilot in the Philippines. He never came home. Grandmother wept bitterly over that. World War II was the last war that should have ever been fought. Along comes the Korean War. We should have never been there. It was to stop communism. Now listen, when a country goes into a war, they should be the last resort. And when they do, they need to go in there and conquer the place. And they should have to buy their freedom back for all the material, money, and lives we lost fighting them. That's the way it ought to be. Well, it didn't happen in Korea. We got whipped in Korea. Nothing happened. We got sent back home after a few years. Vietnam, another totally war that had no benefit for America. Thousands of lives of U.S. American soldiers were destroyed. Iraq, Afghanistan, we should have never been there. Why were we there? Well, I'll tell you why we were in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Why were we there? There's money in war. There's big time money in war. In fact, if a country is on the edge of recession and goes into war, it can pull it out. That's what happened in World War I. There's a lot of money. There's people get filthy rich off of war. These war hawks, they want war going. Why? Because they got their money invested in the weapons of war. Okay? They make big time money. But what happens to the poor man that has to use these weapons? Well, they get killed. Rich people get rich off of wars. Poor people die. Middle class die. You don't see the rich going to war too much. They don't serve. They get some sort of way out. Well, the soldiers have gone downhill through every one of those wars that I told you about. I saw where Trump said we have the greatest army on the face of the earth. Greatest army that has ever been. Well, as far as bombs, military techniques, as far as weaponry, yeah. As far as soldiers, we got the worst. There's a few good men in the armed services, a few, but guess what? You've got women in there, they say, I'm feeling womanly today, it's my time of the month, I don't feel like doing it. We'll go back to your barracks, honey. How you gonna fight wars like that? When you got transgenders in there that says, I know I look like a man, but I feel like a woman. And I think I'm having my womanly time this month, and I need to go back to the tent. How are you going to fight? We need men, tough men, to fight wars. We don't need a bunch of sex perverts. We don't need a bunch of women on the combat field. Why? Because it distracts the men. Why? Because let me tell you something, when they get a woman out there torturing her, the enemy does, it has a bigger effect on a man than if it was a man they were torturing. It has a terrible effect. That's not their place on the field. Okay, all of the soldiers have gone downhill from the first ones I've mentioned to now. If it was to be a fist fight between us and China, we would get stomped. If it would be a physical confrontation between us and Russia, they would annihilate us. I could see all the little sissies running across the field. Yeah, all the transgenders, all the women crying. Ah, yeah, fist fight. Let's see a big fist fight. But we got the weaponry, so we may stand a chance. Well, they say you're supposed to respect the military. Only the good ones do I respect. I don't give them a blanket coverage. Just like same with the police. Back the blue. There's a lot of crooked cops out there. There's some good ones. There's some good ones, believe me. There's some good soldiers. But as far as the percentage-wise of good in the Army and in the police force, the percentage of good is way down. Way down. Why? Because they try to force evil, wicked mandates on them. And that's what they do. America has a lot of no-account people. They're talking about bringing manufacturing back to America. Who's going to do it? Jake, it's hard to find employees. Everybody you talk to, it's hard to find employees. Why? Because people don't want to work. Why? Because they weren't raised to work. Why? Because everybody wants their children to have it easy and nice and comfy and not have to go through what they went through. Well, they need to teach the children the King James Bible. They need to teach the children common sense. They need to teach the children how to work and make a living. And it hadn't been done. So who's going to fill all these jobs if they do come back? Robots? Maybe. But let me tell you something. This AI will end up destroying the human race. It'll be some of the help that helps destroy it. Now, when you got robots doing all the work, and the rich people look around and say, well, what good are these poor people and these middle-class people? Huh? Don't you think that you're going to get eliminated in the future by a machine? Very, very possible. Very possible. Ain't no need in feeding you. The machine don't eat nothing. Just got to repair it every once in a while. Okay. What made it that way? Well, Uncle Paul said it started back there in FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They started giveaway programs. They started welfare. That was the first one, welfare. Then along comes food stamps, EBT. I don't know how many giveaway programs are in America. People don't have to work. They can suck off the government till they're as fat as a flitter. And you look at them. You look at the ones out there that complaining and whining. They all hosses, boy. They are hosses. They can't keep themselves away from the refrigerator or the table. Well, mankind can't make anything that lasts forever. Everything you see that man has ever made will burn with a fervent heat one day. It's junk. It's not reliable. It's not dependable, and it gives you away. What caused that? Well, once again, perverted history. They started with the Bible. I saw a book the other day. I call it a book. I don't call it the Bible. It's called ESV, English Standard Version. They're passing it out to kids. And in that book, there are so many verses missing. Actually just missing. Not only are the verses missing, the numbers, the lettering to the verses is missing. It might go from 37 to 39. 38 is just plumb gone. All right, they started by saying, a few years back, I remember saying, the words in red. That's what you need to watch, the words in red. So they done away with the Old Testament, which does away with a lot of history. They're idiots. Jesus read the Old Testament. Well, guess what? They're doing away with the words in red now. Was there a lot of words in red missing from the ESV? Yeah. A lot of what Jesus said on how to be saved and everything is totally gone. I would not have a bit of problem taking that book and tossing it into the campfire. I don't think God would hold it against me. I think God would say, good job, son. I really do. Well, they're misleading children. When you give those books to children and they're a perversion of the Word of God, you're misleading and causing those children to go down the wrong road, you religious perverts. Okay. There's talking about battles. There's only one battle. I couldn't be a soldier. I couldn't be. Because I wouldn't be in there with the trash that's in there. I would not soldier with a bunch of queers or perverts or a bunch of women. No, I couldn't be a cop. Why? Because of what cops, the rules that they have to go by. I couldn't do it. And they got queers in the cop force, probably transient. They got everything in the police force. So I couldn't be one. I can't communicate with those people and don't want to. But one day, I will be behind a commander-in-chief, a king of kings, a lord of lords. And that's the war I want to see. That's the battle I want to be a part of. And praise God, it says that I will be on a white horse behind that commander-in-chief. That is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And to tell you a little bit about it, turn to chapter 19. Revelation chapter 19. Catholic Church says Revelation 19 says all of the book of Revelation is fiction, shouldn't be there. They say the Old Testament is fiction and shouldn't be there. And they changed a lot of the New Testament with what the Revelations they say God give them. Well, they're liars. The priest and the pope are filthy liars. Do not ever succumb to the Catholic religion or anything like that. Verse 11. Here's the war I want to be in, I want to see, I want to be behind the ruler, I want to be behind the king. Chapter 11, verse 11, chapter 19. And I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dripped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of his fierceness and wrath of Almighty God. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone, and the remnant was slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, whose sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. What a day that will be. What a glorious day that will be. And you say, how can you say that? Why? Because the true ruler comes back. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And he ain't no sissy doing that. No. He is Jesus Christ. You got a chance to choose, people. Choose good.